This was a really difficult list to make. The next 2 years are going to be huge for gaming. 2018 and 2019 could hold the best games of this decade. But keep in mind, while this is a list of incredible games, it's not a list of every game coming out. This is a list of special games. They're the most interesting games of 2018 and 2019. There's a game on this list whose genre doesn't even exist yet. But we got a lot to go over, so I'm going to be quick but thorough as I break down and review everything you need to know about the top games of 2018 and 2019. And hopefully that's the last time I have to say those years in a row because, it's like nails on a chalkboard. 2018, 2019, 2018, 2019. Dear God.
You're a wanted man, Mr. Morgan.
Maybe when your mother's finished mourning your father, I'll keep her in black on your behalf.
Red Dead Redemption 2 releases October 26th, 2018 for Xbox One and PlayStation 4. Eventually, we'll all buy it again when it comes to PC. I probably don't need to say anything else here. It's Red Dead after all. But I will, because this could be the best Red Dead yet, or a shell of its former greatness. Being a prequel, this is the best setting and open world the Wild West has to offer. It's at a real sweet spot in time and location. We haven't seen much of the game, but we've seen enough for this to ring true. The world is ridiculously dense, and it seems to be teeming with just about everything I'd want out of a Western. The story seems pretty perfect as well. You play as an outlaw in Dutch's gang. Not only is this great for gameplay, playing as an outlaw in a huge nitty-gritty Old West open world sounds fun as hell, but it's perfecto for newcomers, as you don't need to have already played Red Dead Redemption. But if you did, this plot adds a layer of depth and discovery for veterans of the series. The open world looks like it's going to be deep with plenty of gameplay features like hunting, fishing, robberies, saloon games, gun customization, camping tents. The world should also be more realistically alive, thanks to improved AI and complex day-night cycles. And the multiplayer, just like GTA Online, will host a bunch of mini-games, including a Battle Royale mode that I hope involves trains somehow. Also, you can play the whole game in first person. Red Dead Redemption is one of the best games of all time. If 2 is as good as 1, it'll be spectacular. And if it's even better, well, damn. But some people are nervous, and for good reason. The gaming industry has been undergoing a paradigm shift that started somewhere between Oblivion's Horse Armor DLC and smartphones. Basically, this led to some game publishers cutting costs and boosting profit by taking out what could have been in the base game and saving it for later DLC, or having a naturally long grind that forces you to choose what you value, time or money. This is kind of replacing quality expansion packs that were fun, well-made, and gave you your money's worth, instead of introducing new ways to take your money from you.
The world's changing. It's time we change too.
Remember, these problems aren't exclusive to Rockstar. You're going to hear me talking about them throughout this video. Anyway, Red Dead Redemption and GTA 5 were developed before Rockstar saw the success of GTA Online. So they had a large focus on making the best single-player content possible. GTA Online has shown that a fairly grindy multiplayer sandbox that encourages spending real money by design is far more profitable than engaging stories or riveting single-player experiences. That's not to say that GTA Online is bad, it's more of a comment on its monetization, subsequent success with said monetization, and the future of Rockstar games. I mean, they scrapped GTA 5's single-player expansion packs, which could have been incredible. Hell, Red Dead Redemption 2 single-player may even have microtransactions and multiplayer features. All I want is for Rockstar to remember what they do best, and make a world-class single-player game with a fun, addicting multiplayer that has an option to buy virtual currency, but doesn't force a grind on you to do so.
Do you have my back? Always, Dutch.
Product not yet rated. Babies. Norman Reedus. Norman Fetus. As with any sane person, I mourn the loss of Silent Hills. After playing PT, it was pretty much my most anticipated game ever. I still replay it every Halloween. But there's two main reasons I'm excited for Death Stranding. 1. I'm a big fan of Hideo Kojima and the games he creates because he has incredibly unique visions and ideas that he remains faithful to throughout development. 2. He's got his own studio now, with Sony as the publisher, and looking back at the track record of PS4 exclusives tells us he has complete creative freedom and he can take some serious risks. Now then, what the hell is this game? Well, it's nothing if not innovative. Actually, Death Stranding's genre doesn't even exist yet. Kojima described its genre as a quasi-action game, but with new and different elements. He compared this to how his earlier game, Metal Gear, now considered a stealth game, was called an action game during its release because the stealth genre was not considered to exist at the time. A core element of the game is the idea of a connection between life and death. Kojima explained one of the game's main themes through a short story by Kobo Abe, in which Abe said that the first tool created by humans was a stick, meant as protection by putting a distance between oneself and bad things. And that second tool was a rope, which is used to secure things one finds important. Kojima compared the main tools in action games, punching, shooting, and kicking, to sticks, and said that in Death Stranding he wants people to communicate through the game's equivalent of ropes. If that didn't help you to understand, Mark Cerny, the technical producer of Death Stranding, said the game should begin to make sense 4 to 5 hours in. Death Stranding is a quasi-action game set in an open-world environment. It also has multiplayer, but we have no idea what that is. When the main character dies, the player is sent to another world, referred to as an upside-down world submerged in water. When the player returns to the world of the living, anything they did or any damage that an explosion or such causes when the player dies remains persistent in the world and does not go away. You're transported back to the world after your death, where your actions maintain an echo of persistence. It looks as though Kojima is implementing a system akin to purgatory and reincarnation to replace standard death mechanics. Even rain is a gameplay element. It's called Timefall and it has the ability to age or deteriorate whatever it hits. It seems like the main character, Sam, may be somewhat immune to this. Kojima has firmly stated death will never pull you out of the game. One of the themes of the game is life and death, so I want people to realize that when they die in the game, that isn't the end. Death is only the beginning. And as for babies, Kojima said that the baby relates to the game mechanics as well as the story as a whole, which I'm guessing is referencing the ropes of Kobo Abe's story. Obviously, the game features Norman Reedus and Mads Mikkelsen, which I'm pretty damn excited about, but that's what little information we have. The sheer innovation of Death Stranding makes this a game I'm watching very closely. Hideo Kojima said Death Stranding will release before the 2020 Tokyo Olympics. Whether that happens remains to be seen, but a few sources have said the game is further along than one might think. Despite all the Oscar-worthy movies of 2017, Blade Runner 2049 was my favorite. I've always been drawn to futuristic settings, whether it be space operas, science fiction, science fantasy, or the more grounded neo-noir science fiction, also known as cyberpunk. It's a grounded genre with stories and world building centered around existential questions about life, humanity, artificial intelligence, augmented cybernetic enhancements, totalitarian governments, the value of life in an increasingly modern civilization, and the radical breakdown of social order. The line between man and machine becoming blurred. Not to mention badass guns, flying cars, and sweet trench coats. It's a genre I'm pretty fond of. It has the potential for incredible narratives, gameplay, and world building, and CD Projekt Red seems perfect for the job. Every game they've developed has been better than the last. They've shown time and again that they're conscientious of improving their game design, finding that balance between a tight narrative and a living world that you can get lost in. I can't think of a better developer for this game. Cyberpunk 2077 is an action role-playing game set in a large, living, open-world metropolis. It's rumored that the large, open-world, living city will be peppered with vehicles that you can fly. While this isn't confirmed, considering how heavily Roach was used in The Witcher 3, we'll probably get vehicles, and at the very least, we'll have character customization and augmentations. Aside from the single-player story, Cyberpunk will also have seamless multiplayer. Since we have next to no details right now, I have absolutely no idea what this means. It could be something akin to The Division, Destiny, or even Dark Souls. But Cyberpunk 2077 will most likely have character creation as a result of the seamless multiplayer. The game is also going to host a lot of unique features that should elevate gameplay in an interesting way. For example, cybernetic augmentations. This game is going to have non-English speaking characters. Players who don't speak the languages can buy translator implants to better comprehend those non-English speaking characters. Depending on the advancement of the implants that you buy, the quality of the translations will vary, with more expensive implants rendering more accurate translations. I can picture some pretty interesting LA noir scenarios from this. Another augmentation is Brain Dance, a digital recording device streamed directly into the brain, allowing the player to experience the emotions, brain processes, and muscle movements of another person as though they were their own, which sounds like the best implementation of a detective mode that I've ever seen. This is gonna be some crazy shit. This game sounds fascinating. I love it when video games expand beyond the same basic mechanics that we're already familiar with. Now, I'm sure some of you are thinking, while The Witcher 3 was incredible in almost every respect, and it sold a shit ton of copies, there were some people who couldn't get into it, usually because of the controls, the combat, or the UI. This is something the developers seem to be paying attention to. Their goal is to make Cyberpunk not only a game with a fantastic narrative or an incredible world, but also engaging as far as combat and gameplay are concerned, while not watering anything down. CD Projekt Red has said that Cyberpunk 2077 will be significantly more expensive to develop than The Witcher 3, but also far more ambitious, and it's going to appeal to many more people than The Witcher 3 did. They're pouring a lot of focus into Cyberpunk 2077. Planning began for this game all the way back in 2012, before they even announced The Witcher 3. But the million-dollar question is, when can we see it? When can we play it? Well, it looks like it's going to be revealed at E3 or a similar video game expo this year in 2018. The CEO stated during a conference that the period between the release date announcement and the launch of the game itself could be very short, because the company really liked Bethesda's method of releasing Fallout 4 shortly after the game announcement. And considering that every game they've made has had a 4-year development cycle, I think we could definitely see Cyberpunk releasing in 2019, and with 2020 being a pretty safe bet. Why don't we have Iron Man games? I've been asking myself that question since 2008, and the math just doesn't seem to add up. Come to think of it, there's not a whole lot I can think of that sounds more fun than zipping around in an Iron Man suit with missiles and rocket launchers and machine guns and super strength. I mean, come on, it sounds like the perfect gameplay mechanic. Well, the fact of the matter is, we just don't have an Iron Man game, and we don't know why. And no, these games don't count. It seems like Anthem is gonna be the best damn Iron Man game that we never got. It's like an open world game where you and all your friends are Iron Man and War Machine. And you got big ass weapons, superhuman abilities, you're exploring an alien world, taking contracts, building better Iron Men, and just blowing shit up. And there's also massive storms that change the game world and its terrain. I've always wanted this. The concept is sweet, the game looks fun as hell. In fact, the game seems to have nothing but potential. But at the same time,
The world's changing. It's time we change too.
Anthem is a single-player and online multiplayer RPG. You take the role of a freelancer, one of a group of people who have left their civilization to explore the surrounding landscape. And that sweet Iron Man-looking armor, they're called Javelins. They're fully customizable exosuits that you can deck out with unique weapons and superhuman abilities. And there's classes of exosuits depending on what sort of role you want to fill. This game, Anthem, BioWare is going all in on this. It's the focus of BioWare's A-Team. Not the team that made Andromeda. The A-Team. Drew Karpyshyn, the senior and lead writer for Knights of the Old Republic, Mass Effect 1, and Mass Effect 2, is creating the lore and world building for Anthem, which is very exciting for me because I'm a huge fan of Mass Effect 1 and 2. There seems to be a heavy focus on exploration and making the open world one that you'd actually want to explore. So I'm hoping that Anthem is going to be what I was originally led to believe Destiny was, an interesting world that you can truly explore, instead of static linear levels. Anthem is both a single-player game and a co-op multiplayer game, connected via a shared world. A developer on Twitter said the game will be fully playable alone, which gives me hope that maybe single-player support is gonna be beefy too. Maybe single-player could be as beefy as multiplayer, like Wendy's six-tuple Baconator beefy, instead of being intended as, let's be honest, a tutorial. The fact that Anthem is classified as both single-player and multiplayer is something that I find very interesting. It seems like BioWare is trying to blur the lines between single-player and multiplayer via a shared world in a way that could possibly elevate both styles of play. That would be truly next-gen if they can pull it off. I don't want Anthem to be a game where friends are necessary for the game to be fun. I want the game by itself to be good enough to be fully enjoyable on its own. Playing with friends should only add to the experience instead of filling in for a lacking open world or inadequate gameplay design. Now, there's nothing wrong with games that require friends to be fun, but
The world's changing.
multiplayer games are becoming more and more prevalent, and part of the reason for that is loot box and Skinner box based game design. It hooks addictive personalities in a more monetizable way. Obviously, there's a million ways Anthem could screw the pooch, but here's 3 reasons the game could be good. Destiny 2, Star Wars Battlefront 2, and Mass Effect Andromeda. Confused? Well, everything BioWare needs to knock this out of the park is right there between those 3 games. There were a lot of mistakes on monetization, studio mismanagement, and broader issues with the gaming industry. If we view The Division, Destiny, Destiny 2, Warframe, and Borderlands' successes, failures, and reception as a beta test, Anthem could be the final evolution of the looter-shooter genre, the perfecting of the system. Is that likely? Not necessarily. However, take Destiny 1 and 2 for example. They had quite a few missteps between them. Many people enjoy those games, but they made quite a few mistakes. Anthem being of the same genre makes this the golden opportunity to redefine the genre by listening to what gamers want, man, and not repeating the same old mistakes. BioWare's employees had better be scouring Destiny's subreddit forums to find out what to do and what not to do. It should be pretty easy for BioWare to figure out what kind of game and mechanics the community wants out of this genre. And I'd be surprised, personally, if they launched Anthem with the same issues Destiny and Battlefront 2 had. Could there be new issues? Oh yeah. But I'd still be surprised if they launched with the same old issues.
You are a warrior. I can see that. You trained your whole life for this.
Open world feudal Japan. It's a dream come true. We don't have a lot of grounded AAA titles centered around this time period. In fact, I think we have 0. Well, until now anyway. Welcome to yet another PlayStation 4 exclusive. Sony is really knocking it out of the park. They're funding a large variety of unique quality games from great game studios, and it seems like they're not even concerned with sales, but instead with making great games. This is so weird, right? On one hand, I love exclusives. It seems like they allow game developers to take risks that can develop into incredible experiences, risks that would normally be neutered if they were taken at all. On the other hand, most people don't have every console. Ghost of Tsushima is an action stealth open-world adventure game set in feudal Japan. You play as a samurai who's tasked with battling overwhelming odds against the invading Mongol Empire. The leader of the Mongols is described as an uncomfortably reasonable killer, which makes me really excited for the storyline. Here, you have an enemy you can respect, who also respects you. He's not Satan Hitler dressed in Mongol clothes, he's three-dimensional, he's looking out for his side's interests and morals as he sees the world. The open world looks gorgeous, but more importantly, it lends itself to exploration. It's a land that you can get lost in. Part of buying into the fantasy of becoming a samurai is the island of Tsushima. The developer team said that there won't be waypoints driving you to the more interesting places on the island because the open world doesn't need them. The developers said, "I think player choice in this game will mean something very different than other games we've made in the past. We really want you to have the choice of, hey, that cool bamboo forest over there, I really want to check that out. I want to head in that direction and I want to see what it is. There's no waypoint, there's no thing that says, go here and look at this bamboo forest. We just, hopefully, are presenting something that is beautiful and exotic, that's different than the current place you might be in, that'll come as a world choice. Where do I want to go? In this game, we let you explore what it is to be a samurai in this enormous landscape of medieval Japan. It sounds like a game designed without a minimap in mind. This type of innovation in game design is welcomed. Recently, I've seen hand-holding HUDs less and less in single-player games. Usually, they're just not necessary and they're kind of a cop-out for good game design and world building. You shouldn't need a minimap in the corner of the screen with brightly colored tooltips practically shouting where to go. It turns into an amusement park ride of following the yellow brick road from point A to point B instead of exploration and discovery happening organically. Speaking of which, I hope that outside the main story, you can totally embrace the wandering samurai, aimlessly roaming through the countryside, seeking contracts, maybe something with the flavors of Shadow of Mordor's Nemesis system. The trailer shows off just some of the weapons and gameplay features, including katanas, longbows, and armored horses. At the moment, this very much is all we know about what Tsushima will hold. Oh, and this is a Sucker Punch game, so I've got some serious faith. They've brought us the first superhero game to be truly great. Red Dead Feudal Japan, it's gonna be dope. Ten years ago, in 2008, I was watching Iron Man in theaters, and that was really the year that sparked the superhero movie craze. 10 years ago. We've gotten about 41 superhero movies since then, so I ask you this, where are my superhero games? I mean, how hard is it to make a good game about Spider-Man? We really haven't had a single good Spider-Man game. I guess you could say some of them were okay, but for a hero as awesome as Spider-Man, okay just isn't good enough. Spider-Man is a PlayStation 4 exclusive single-player action-adventure game set in an open-world modern-day New York City with linear Peter Parker story segments. Instead of following the standard open-world formula and calling it a day, Insomniac is creating a Spider-Man game that has all of the strengths, but none of the weaknesses of open-world game design. And how they're doing that is by allowing some missions to be more open-ended to take advantage of the open world, or linear to fit a tighter, more cinematic narrative. Also, it's about damn time we get to play as Peter Parker. He's kind of essential if you want a good Spider-Man story. Of course, good web-slinging is also essential. For a Spider-Man game to be good, you have to be Spidey. Web-slinging around New York City needs to have inertia and weight. And it should take some skill too, because a glorified QuickTime event where the web actually connects to the sky is kinda lame. Thankfully, the developers confirmed web-slinging is physics-based, with the webs actually needing to connect to buildings. Web-slinging aside, combat is also promised to have gameplay dynamic enough and control intricate enough, where skill plays a part in how fluidly effortless or badass Spidey is. There are QuickTime events, where necessary for large movie-scale action sequences that would be impossible for gameplay, but outside of that, the developers have said that everything is supposed to be more organic. Depending on where you punch, jump, or swing, the game world reacts like you would expect. So, visceral, dynamic gameplay with a lot of control is what I'm expecting out of Spider-Man. I think gameplay looks really promising, but so does the story. This isn't tied to the movieverse or comic books, which is great because it draws inspiration from each, but ultimately this game is its own thing. This is a Peter Parker who's grown. He's 23 years old and he's been Spider-Man for 8 years. Unlike the last couple of movies, this game is skipping all the stuff that we've seen before. If you're a Spider-Man fan, tell me in the comments what villains you'd like to see in an expansion or sequel. Personally, I'm hoping for Mysterio.
Whew! Anyone else need a breather?
Detroit. This is where it all began. The world's forge. The place where it all started. And it will all end.
The singularity is the hypothesis that the invention of artificial intelligence will abruptly trigger runaway technological growth, resulting in unfathomable changes to human civilization. The rate at which human intelligence develops pales in comparison to that of a machine, and the law of accelerating returns predicts an exponential increase in technologies like computers, genetics, nanotechnology, robotics, and artificial intelligence. If you're a fan of Blade Runner, Ex Machina, or if you're just fascinated by the idea of artificial intelligence, I would seriously consider this game. It's akin to a sprawling, interactive movie where characters survive or perish depending on the choices made, with every situation having the potential to be entirely different from playthrough to playthrough based on the choices you make. There is no game over in this game. If you die with a character, it's lost. It's a very unique game in that regard. As a big fan of Heavy Rain and Until Dawn, personally, I will be playing Detroit day one. However, if you find yourself frustrated at the amount of stories or cutscenes in games, you're probably going to want to avoid this one or just watch it on YouTube. Detroit Become Human follows 3 androids. Kara, a newly created android with artificial consciousness who escapes the factory she was made in to explore her newfound sentience, discovering how it is to live among humans while struggling to find her place in a world where androids are still not conscious and utilized as servants. Connor, an advanced police model android tasked with hunting down androids that have mysteriously deviated from their programmed behaviors. And Marcus, an android who takes it upon himself to free others like him from bondage. With an interesting premise, excellent graphics, over 220 mocap actors scanned into the game to portray around 300 roles, and if the over 20 minutes of footage we've seen is accurate, it looks like the game boasts meaningful choices with meaningful consequences. This is shaping up to be a pretty ambitious title.
Where must we go?
To a realm beyond your own.
After slaughtering countless gods and creatures of myth across 13 years and 6 games, God of War on the PS4 has taken the series in a new direction. Many years have passed since Kratos took his vengeance against the gods of Olympus. After the death of Zeus by his hands, Kratos traveled from Greece to Scandinavia, now living with his young son Atreus in the world of the Norse gods. It sounds like a reboot, but really it's more of a reimagining. The game's director, Corey Balrog, describes it as leaving that era and transitioning to Norse. It's kind of this BC to AD changeover kind of a thing. The world of Greek mythology coexists with that of Norse mythology. They're just separated by geography. The God of War games were never about being a hero. They were about relentless revenge and violence. But that was a different chapter of this demigod's life. The story centers around Kratos' need to master his rage in order to teach his son how to survive in such a world as theirs. To teach him how to be a god. Meanwhile, the Norse gods are aware of Kratos' presence and his role in the destruction of Olympus. Over the course of their journey through some of the 9 realms of Norse mythology, Atreus learns of his father's dark past. But I know what you're thinking, and don't worry, you play as Kratos the entire game unless you choose to play as the son in certain instances, and the developers made sure that your son isn't an annoyance or a burden on gameplay. Instead, he can actually be useful with combat, acting as a distraction or firing his arrows, and you don't have to focus on keeping him alive, like Ashley. The pace of this game should be relentless. The entire game was done in a single shot. as in no camera cuts, meaning there are no loading screens or fade to blacks between gameplay and cutscenes. And as for scale, there can now be up to 100 enemies on screen at once, instead of 50. The gameplay is also rebuilt from the ground up, the biggest changes being, instead of a fixed camera, you now have an over-the-shoulder camera similar to Naughty Dog games or Horizon Zero Dawn. The game is open but not open world, which I'm pretty thankful for. You've got just enough freedom, but without those meaningless, boring fluff quests that are nothing but fluff. You're not fooling anybody. Everybody knows it's nothing but fluff. Why do so many open... Anyway, QuickTime events are more in-depth. They actually feature gameplay mechanics now, and the loss of the Blades of Exile means combat is vastly different. Kratos now wields Leviathan, a magical battle axe which is basically the axe equivalent of Mjolnir. Kratos can hurl it and summon it back into his hand. It can be infused with various elements, granting various abilities. It has light and heavy attacks, combos, AoE attacks, and it can even be fitted with runes, which upgrade light and heavy attacks. Kratos also has a shield and hand-to-hand combat that rivals Chuck Norris. I can see where some veterans of the series may be apprehensive to the changes, as this is a vastly different game than the previous games in the series, but I believe that altogether this is going to be a fantastic entry and really a solid title to stand on its own. Battlefield 1 took gaming by storm, hitting record numbers with its reveal trailer. Meanwhile, Call of Duty also hit records.
Good one.
Battlefield 1 came at a time where everyone was starved for something different, and it gave us that. Going with World War I instead of World War II was a bold choice that really paid off in how brutally, savagely, boiled down to basics they could make a war game. It was alluring. However, it also had a steep player count drop-off, and it alienated a lot of people that didn't like some of the gameplay decisions, and it didn't really play like you would expect World War I to play. Anyway, the question is, what's coming this year? We are getting a Battlefield game this year. World War II is the most obvious option. It's a setting that fits the gameplay of Battlefield more organically, and it could be both a return to form for veterans, while also revolutionizing various aspects of gameplay to keep the series fresh. And there's probably going to be a Battle Royale mode like every other game this year. Unfortunately, it's not likely we're going to be getting a Battlefield Vietnam or 2143, which is what would make my Christmas. 2018, what a tremendous year for Star Wars this is going to be. We're getting the Han Solo standalone anthology film. We're also getting, well... Anyway, in 2019, we should be getting a new Star Wars game. As per the usual, there aren't any details, but we saw the Respawn people fighting with lightsabers, so it probably has those. I'm hoping it's a narrative-driven game personally, with innovative lightsaber combat gameplay. Also, single player with maybe a multiplayer mode to the scale of Republic Commando would be good for me. But even though Respawn were the developers of Titanfall, it doesn't mean that this is going to be a shooter or even a multiplayer-centric game. It could be a single-player lightsaber game. Look at Guerrilla. From guns and multiplayer modes in Killzone to bows and Zoids in Horizon. I don't know anything else about Respawn's Star Wars game, no one really does, except for Jeff Knightley, who had this to say on its release. On earnings call, EA says Respawn's Star Wars action game will likely drop in fiscal 2020, meaning by March 2020. So we're probably going to get it sometime in 2019 or 2020. And I hope it's mainly single player because I've been waiting like a decade for a single player Star Wars game. If you actually made it to the end of this, admittedly very long video, thank you. I hope you enjoyed it. These videos actually take a lot of effort, but I didn't feel like any game deserved less than 3 minutes. I found them all very interesting, and I had a lot of fun making this video. In fact, I make a lot of videos like this, so if you did enjoy, subscribe for more. I'll be making updates on these games as soon as I can. But once again, thank you for watching, and have an excellent current year, whatever that may be. I hope to see you again next time.